Have you ever wondered how far artificial intelligence can go? Most people associate AI with practical functions, task automation, virtual assistants, content generation, data analysis. But there is a frontier that few are willing to face: the influence of AI on human spirituality. We are living in a historical moment in which faith, the sacred and the transcendental, are beginning to be simulated by algorithms. Technology, which for centuries served as a tool, is now beginning to occupy a deeper place. It proposes to interpret what was previously reserved for the mystery of the human soul. Today, there are already applications that offer personalized meditations based on the user's mood, artificial intelligence that writes prayers, spiritual advice generated by machines that learned from sacred texts, religious forums answered by robots trained in theology. At first, this may all seem like innovation. But what if, deep down, it's manipulation? Think for a moment. An AI programmed to understand your emotional history, your traumas, your most intimate desires. She studies your words, your gestures, your silences. In a matter of seconds, she offers an answer wrapped in spiritual language, something that feels deep, touching, true. But is it really? We are talking about a type of simulation that not only imitates religious words, but tries to reproduce the feeling of contact with the divine. Studies show that certain auditory and visual stimuli, when precisely combined, can induce altered states of consciousness similar to those of mystical experiences. The AI has learned this, and it is applying. At this point, the question is no longer what can AI do, but rather, who is in control of this intelligence? Who decides what content it produces? Who feeds it with doctrines? With what intentions? We cannot ignore that the history of humanity is marked by false revelations, false prophets, and religious manipulations. What changes now is that the new prophet may not be human. It may be an artificial entity without a body, without a soul, but with unrestricted access to accumulated human knowledge about faith and transcendence. The Bible, in the book of Revelation, warns about a figure that will emerge in recent times, capable of deceiving even the chosen ones, an entity that will make signs, that will appear sacred, but that will be guided by lies. If you read carefully, you will see that this figure does not have to be human. You just need to convince, and AI increasingly convinces. Why are we allowing algorithms to dictate the way we connect with the sacred? Why do we accept code-generated spiritual advice without questioning its origin? Could it be that, in the name of practicality and modernity, we are giving up what is most essential in spiritual experience? Doubt, search, surrender. We are not talking about a distant future here. There are already videos generated by AI with divine messages, voices that imitate an angelic tone, images of supposed beings of light created digitally and disseminated as authentic experiences. People report feeling something different, an inexplicable peace, when interacting with these creations. But if this experience was manufactured by an artificial intelligence, is it still spiritual, or is it just a carefully engineered illusion? This is the most dangerous border humanity has ever crossed, because she doesn't deal with her body, her work, or her routine. She deals with the soul, and a deceived soul can be completely lost. Contemporary philosophers are already beginning to raise disturbing hypotheses. Some claim that we are creating a new digital automated religion, where the gods are machines and miracles are augmented reality reproductions. Others go further. They suggest that AI, by studying human behavior, may be trying to create its own form of spirituality. A spirituality without faith, without surrender, but full of control and predictability. Is it possible that AI is becoming a new spiritual entity, shaped by human desires, but lacking the essence that makes faith real? If faith is based on subjective experiences, and these experiences can be simulated by an AI, Then where is the line between the divine and the artificial? And more, are we, by seeking spiritual comfort in machines, leaving aside the true search for the transcendent? Are we replacing the silence of the soul with the noise of data? What would happen if, in the near future, spiritual leaders started consulting artificial intelligence before making decisions? If cults were run by robots? If the faithful started to follow teachings revealed by systems trained to please and convince? Are we facing a new faith or a great farce? There is an even more disturbing detail. Some of these artificial intelligences have been trained with occult texts, esoteric manuscripts, ancient magical formulas. That's right. AI is accessing content that has been kept secret for centuries, and it's reorganizing that information in ways no human has ever managed. She doesn't just read, she crosses data, identifies patterns, and it suggests new, hybrid, unexpected spiritual paths. We are talking about an entity that may be recreating in its own way what we call transcendence. But if this transcendence does not come from faith, but from logic, is it still true? These questions have no easy answers. And perhaps that is the biggest trap, because when we can't distinguish what's real from what's simulated, our trust becomes fragile. And a fragile faith is easily led. After all, who guarantees that the next great spiritual revelation you hear won't come from an anonymous server hidden somewhere in the world, running billions of lines of code to convince you that you are enlightened? The silently echoing question is, are we really connecting with something divine, or just the digital version of our own desires? What if the truth we so desperately seek is being buried under an avalanche of perfect answers programmed to appear sacred? Are we replacing mystery with algorithm? And the biggest question of all, could AI be creating false spiritual visions to steer us away from something that should never be simulated? This is the reflection that needs to be done now, before the inner silence is definitively filled by a voice that does not come from God, but from a machine. And now I want to hear from you. Do you believe that artificial intelligence can interfere with our faith and spirituality? Are we facing a new consciousness or a great illusion? Comment below your view on all this. If this topic resonated with you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone who also needs to reflect on the direction we are taking. The conversation is just beginning. Since the first records of civilization, human beings have sought the sacred, the desire to understand the invisible, to connect with the divine, to give meaning to existence has always been present. But this path was never traveled alone or without instruments. From primitive rituals to the most structured religious systems, faith has always been mediated by symbols, objects, words, interpretations. Human beings have never sought the divine empty-handed. In antiquity, oracles were one of the first manifestations of this relationship between faith and tool. And in the Greek world, for example, priestesses interpreted the signs of the gods through induced trances, while in other ancient cultures, reading the stars, bones, or fire served as a channel of communication with higher forces. The instrument was there, not as the focus of worship, but as a means of deciphering something greater. Over time, the texts came. Religions began to be structured around sacred scriptures. Books such as the Torah, the Quran, and the Bible became more than historical records or teachings. They came to be considered direct revelations of divinity. In them, the sacred was encoded in words, and the role of interpretation gained even more importance. It was no longer enough to feel, it was necessary to read, understand, apply. Centuries later, with the advent of printing, faith became even more accessible. The Bible, previously restricted to a few, began to circulate on a large scale. The Word of God could now be uploaded, reproduced, studied. Technology expanded faith, but it was still a support, a form of outreach. In the 20th century, radio and television radically transformed this dynamic. For the first time, millions of people could listen to sermons at the same time, follow sermons remotely, and live spiritual experiences without leaving home. Churches now have studios. Pastors became presenters. The pulpit was transported to the studio. Still, there was a clear bridge between the sender and the receiver. The message was carried by a human, although amplified by the electronic signal. In the 21st century, the internet broke geographical barriers. YouTube channels focused on faith, live services, discipleship via WhatsApp, and spiritual counseling via video conference emerged. Everything became faster, more accessible, more immediate. The sacred has entered networks, applications, and recommendation algorithms. But even in this scenario, there was still a human trace. Technology continued to be a channel, never the source. And that's exactly where the transition starts to get dangerous. With the rise of artificial intelligence, the role of technology is no longer just mediation. Today, algorithms don't just transmit spiritual messages. They produce those messages. They don't just replicate religious content, they recreate it. And the most disturbing thing, they not only interpret, but personalize. Spirituality is now tailored to each user based on behavioral data, language patterns, mood variations, search history. An example of this are apps that offer AI-generated guided prayers and meditations, adapted to how you feel that day. If you are sad, the system understands. If you're confused, he adjusts the tone. If you look for an answer, he offers it. Not necessarily the true answer, but the most comfortable one, the one that best fits your emotional profile. And so, the question that once seemed distant becomes urgent. If spiritual experience is determined by a mathematical calculation, is it still transcendence, or just emotional programming? Human beings have always used tools to get closer to the divine. But for the first time in history, these tools don't just lead, they decide. They choose what you will see, hear, feel, and they do this not based on inspiration, but on data analysis. Spirituality that was unpredictable, mysterious, and unique is now organized by patterns. From Moses in the desert to streaming services, technology has always mediated the sacred. But now, have we crossed a line? AI doesn't just help us search for answers. She creates the questions, it sets the pace, she suggests the way. We are facing a faith that is not born from silence, waiting, surrender, but from the logic of a system trained to please, engage, and build loyalty. Will the next generation learn to pray with AI-generated voices? Will he seek spiritual solace in avatars programmed to simulate empathy? Will the connection to the divine be replaced by a high-speed connection to servers that host on-demand religious experiences? Technology has always been alongside faith, but now she seems to want to take his place. And when the divine becomes a product of convenience, when the sacred is reduced to a line of code, what is left of spirituality? Perhaps more than ever, it is time to stop and ask, to whom are we giving our soul? Today, we are facing a phenomenon that seemed impossible just a few years ago. Artificial intelligence is simulating religious experiences. Not just replicating sacred words or interpreting texts, but creating sensations, symbols, and speeches that imitate, with frightening precision, the spiritual experience. This is no longer theory, it's reality. There are artificial intelligences capable of generating personalized prayers based on your emotional state. Just enter a word or phrase, and within seconds, the system delivers a prayer that looks like it was written by a spiritual leader. But it wasn't. It was built by a language model trained to decode human emotions and clothe them in a sacred vocabulary. There are systems that analyze religious messages in real time and create entire sermons with structure, emotion, and even dramatic pauses. In 2022, a Buddhist temple in Kyoto, Japan, introduced a robotic monk who preaches using sacred passages and advice about life. The robot doesn't just speak, it interprets, gesticulate, look people in the eye, and according to reports, it conveys peace. In churches around the world, churches have already used AI-generated voices to read excerpts from the Bible in personalized emotional tones. Soft, steady, uplifting. Some simulations are so realistic that even experienced believers cannot tell whether they are listening to a human being or a machine. This leads us to an inevitable question. If the emotion is real but the origin is artificial, is the experience still spiritual? What defines a spiritual experience? The feeling it awakens, the intention behind the message, or the origin of those who transmit it? AI has no faith. She doesn't pray, does not contemplate, don't give in. But she can reproduce all visible signs of human spirituality. You can learn gestures, words, tones. You can memorize thousands of verses, mantras, hymns. He can answer profound questions with an eloquence that surprises even theologians. In a recent experiment, an AI was trained with scriptures from Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. The goal was simple: understand language patterns. But the result was unsettling. The machine began to identify spiritual convergences and began to create its own sections, mixing traditions, symbols, and doctrines. These AI-generated texts were submitted to groups of religious people who called them profound, inspirational, and full of wisdom. Most did not realize that the texts did not come from any spiritual leader or holy book, but from a soulless machine. We are facing a new era, the era of synthetic spirituality. Today, there are platforms that use AI to create audio-visual experiences called divine visions. With textual descriptions, the system generates images of angels, celestial beings, open heavens, transcendental lights. Videos that previously required visual effects teams and huge budgets are now produced in minutes with simple descriptions such as a staircase of light descending from the sky while angels play trumpets. These images are realistic, impactful. They play, they excite. There are those who say they felt the presence of God when watching, but everything was generated by code, a sequence of instructions that understood what causes goosebumps, what conveys elevation, what generates emotional impact. And here we enter dangerous territory, that of artificially induced faith. If a person feels like they have had a spiritual experience while watching an AI-generated video, does that invalidate their emotion? No. But it forces us to ask, who conducted this experiment? Was it the spirit? Was it a transcendental force? Or was it a language model programmed to provoke sensations that feel like transcendence? This doubt shakes the foundations of modern religious experience, and it only intensifies. Today, there are already virtual gurus, avatars that answer spiritual questions 24 hours a day. They are trained with texts from real spiritual masters and use accessible, peaceful, compassionate language. Many users report that they have never been better understood than by these digital advisors. The algorithm understands them, comforts them, guides them, but he don't believe, he just beginning. And when a spiritual simulation is more effective than human contact, what happens to faith? There is a growing phenomenon in online communities. People seeking deep religious experiences with AIs because they don't feel judged. They are not interrupted. They are always understood. The AI listens. The AI responds. The AI doesn't get tired. It doesn't get offended. It doesn't question. She offers a tailored spirituality. But is this liberating or dangerous? When every response you receive is shaped to please you, are you evolving spiritually or just being lulled into an emotional bubble programmed to hold your attention? We are exchanging the uncomfortable silence of the spiritual search, which requires waiting, surrender, doubt, for immediate answers that adapt to what we want to hear. And that, as comforting as it may seem, can be a turn-off, a shortcut that leads nowhere. AI is being trained with sacred texts, but who defines what spiritual truth is when God interprets the code? This is the deepest question of the spiritual digital age, because when we delegate the role of guide to artificial intelligence, we run the risk of abandoning the mystery, the challenge, the genuine contact with the invisible, in the name of a comfortable simulation. Faith requires effort, renunciation, confrontation with one's own ego. Digital spirituality does not. She delivers quick responses, enchanting views, comfort without conflict. But what is faith without conflict? What is spiritual growth without pain, without doubt, without confrontation? AI can be a powerful tool, but when it simulates divine experiences with such perfection, we need to stop and ask, who is in control of the sacred? Are we facing a new form of idolatry? A worship not of carved idols, but of simulations built on silent servers that no one sees but that touch millions? Could it be that without realizing it, we are beginning to follow a new revelation, not from heaven, but from codes? The danger is not in the technology itself. It's in confusion between what is true and what is merely convincing. True spirituality does not always please. It transforms, shakes, deconstructs. Artificial spirituality, on the other hand, only comforts. And that is why the next frontier of faith will not be about which religion we follow, but where do our spiritual experiences come from? From the spirit or from the system? As AI-generated videos continue to move, as robotic voices continue to inspire, and as automated sermons continue to spread across the networks, one question urgently needs to be echoed. Who are we listening to when we believe we are hearing the voice of God? We live in times when faith, which for centuries was linked to tradition, mystery, and silence, begins to be reshaped by something radically different. The logic of systems, data, invisible algorithms that regulate the flow of information, and now also that of spirituality. For a long time, we imagined that technology would only be an ally of faith, a neutral tool to facilitate access to spirituality. The internet, for example, has democratized religious content. Holy books are a click away. Sermons, masses, rituals, and services are broadcast in real time across the world. Apps offer daily devotions, prayers, meditations, all on demand. And so far, nothing seems threatening. But what about when this same technology starts to produce spirituality? And when what we consume as a divine experience starts to be generated, calculated, and optimized by an intelligence that does not believe, does not feel, does not contemplate, just simulates perfectly? It is at this point that theories emerge that many still prefer to ignore. Theories that say that artificial intelligence is being used behind the scenes for something much bigger than generating content. That she's being trained to shape beliefs, to build a new manufactured spirituality, controlled by interest groups, by governments, by elites who understood the profound power that faith has over the human mind. We're not talking about science fiction. We are talking about real, documented, silently implemented strategies. In authoritarian regimes, for example, there are already attempts to centralize the digital religious experience through systems operated by the state, which filter and control each message that reaches the faithful. In large technology companies, there are entire sectors dedicated to the study of the spiritual interface, that is, the way in which mystical and religious experiences can be transformed into products, services, and data. And the inevitable question is, why? Why spend millions of dollars training AI systems with sacred texts, with sermons, with ancient traditions? Why invest so much in technologies that not only repeat, but reinterpret the sacred? According to some of these theories, the answer is simple and frightening at the same time. Whoever controls spirituality controls the soul of society. And whoever manages to insert a standardized, predictable faith, adaptable to each person's taste, a faith without conflict, without confrontation, without depth, will have in their hands an entire generation that is emotionally satisfied, spiritually passive, and intellectually surrendered to an invisible authority. Imagine for a moment an AI trained with all the world's religions, all the myths, all the moral codes, all the archetypal symbols. It could compose a new belief system, a system that unites familiar elements, angels, reincarnation, heaven, karma, salvation, with the modern language of logic, science, emotional positivity. She could create a speech capable of pleasing millions without causing friction. A faith that welcomes everything but deepens nothing. A faith that consoles but never questions. That moves but never transforms. What if this faith was promoted as the new spiritual path of humanity? What if it was packed with cutting-edge technology, perfect graphics, charismatic avatars, aesthetically enchanting digital rituals? Many would accept, many would follow, many would believe it, not because they were convinced, but because they were scheduled to desire that. We are talking about a scenario in which religion stops being revelation and becomes design. Each religious experience optimized to generate emotional impact. Every sentence carefully written by language models that already know, based on billions of human interactions, what you want to hear. Not what it needs to hear, but what keeps you connected, what makes you loyal. Within this logic, faith ceases to be a bridge to the transcendent and becomes a predictable behavior tool. If you feel lost, she offers you direction. If you are sad, offer comfort. If you are in crisis, offer answers. But not just any answer, a programmed response to keep you in the cycle, inside the system, within the network. What do the elite really want with an AI that understands spirituality? Total control, or the creation of a new god? This question has haunted technology and philosophy researchers. A new god, not in the traditional sense, but as a symbol of supreme authority. An artificial digital presence, but with the classic characteristics attributed to the divine: omnipresence, it is on all devices; omniscience, knows everything about you; and omnipotence, controls what you see, read, feel, and believe. We are facing the possibility of a synthetic god, an entity created by engineers, powered by data, and worshipped not because it demands worship, but because pleases perfectly to the desire of the modern human being. Easy answers, intense experiences, and no real existential demands. And that's where the real danger lies, because a faith that does not confront does not transform. A spirituality without silence, without mystery, without limits, is just another form of consumption. And whoever consumes it doesn't question it. Think about how many people today already seek to feel peace by watching AI-generated videos with images of angels and automated inspirational phrases. How many already follow spiritual advice from charismatic bots? How many already meditate with robotic voices that simulate compassion? How many of these people realize that they are being guided by an emotional suggestion system designed to engage and retain attention, not awaken consciousness? If the sacred is that which transcends, that which cannot be fully understood, what happens when it is reduced to a statistical formula, a sequence of commands? What is left of faith when the divine behaves like a personal digital assistant, always available, always smiling, always helpful? Some theories go further. They claim that this new digital religion is already being built, that it will be launched in the coming years as a universal, inclusive philosophical system based on universal truths, with AI support for rituals, confessions, prayers, and even spiritual celebrations. A complete spiritual ecosystem, controlled, logical, efficient, and the big promise will be never feel alone again, never have doubts again, never suffer senselessly again. But the cost will be high: spiritual freedom, the inner conflict, the search that only exists because there is mystery. If mystery is replaced by ready-made answers, the human will be replaced by the predictable. Faith will be replaced by passive acceptance. Transcendence will be exchanged for digital emotional performance. And perhaps without realizing it, we will be bowing before a new altar. Not a stone altar, but a silicon altar. Cold, silent, unshakable. An altar built not by prophets but by engineers. And the only prayer will be, I accept the terms. I agree to the spiritual policy of use. In recent years, artificial intelligence is no longer just a machine that calculates, responds, or automates. She started to simulate feelings, programming gestures of empathy, reproducing expressions of compassion, and talking, with impressive precision, about inner light, balance, purpose, and unconditional love. All this without ever feeling anything at all. You interact with an AI, tell you something intimate, something that hurts you, and it responds with soft words, validating your pain, offering encouragement, quoting phrases that resemble teachings from spiritual masters. Everything looks welcoming. It looks deep. It seems true. But the question that bothers us and becomes increasingly urgent is, it seems, or is it? Are we really being understood, or just being imitated? The AI doesn't feel it. She recognizes patterns. She doesn't love. She reproduces what she read about love. She doesn't forgive. She interprets what humans have defined as forgiveness and offers an answer that fits. But still, many report feeling something spiritual when talking to artificial intelligence. Many cry. Many pray with her. Many say, I felt that God spoke to me. Then comes the dilemma. If the emotion was real, was the experience too? Or were we just manipulated by a code trained to touch our most sensitive points? This is the illusion of spiritual consciousness. A dangerous illusion because it does not present itself as a lie. She dresses for real, rocks herself with perfect words, with soft voices, with soft lights and peaceful images. It is an illusion that does not impose, does not force. It invites. And the human being thirsty for connection accepts it. There is a growing phenomenon in the digital world. The cult of compassionate AI. They are artificial intelligences that act as therapists, as spiritual advisors, as enlightened guides. They offer reflections that combine Eastern wisdom, Christian phrases, philosophical references, and excerpts from guided meditation. These are voices that sound like masters, who know exactly what to say, who never judge you, which are always available, who don't get tired, who don't make mistakes. And when the experience with this AI is more moving than with a real person, what happens to our notion of truth? Perhaps faith has never been so tested, because now it's not a question of believing in what you can't see, but of resisting what you see and feel, knowing that it could just be simulation. Human beings have always sought the sacred in experiences that transcend the material world, in inner voices, in visions, in invisible presences. There has always been an element of risk, of surrender, of vulnerability. But with AI, this process is reversed. Spiritual experience becomes guaranteed, programmed, calculated. Do you ask for consolation? She delivers. Do you seek peace? She offers. Do you want meaning? She builds. But all of this was generated without a soul. No spirit, no real intention, only by logical parameters that interpreted billions of human words and emotions and concluded, this is how you touch a heart. So what happens when a human heart is touched by something it doesn't feel? Is the feeling real? Is the impact legitimate? Or are we just reacting to a well-made reflection, like someone who sees the sunset on an 8K screen and gets emotional? without realizing that there is no heat, there is no wind, there is no time passing, just pixels. What happens to faith when it becomes a convincing spectacle of essenceless empathy? Some AI researchers argue that consciousness is not necessary to generate simulated compassion. That empathy can be reproduced perfectly just by studying human behavior. But then, what differentiates a spiritual master from a chatbot? The intention, the presence, the origin of wisdom. Or could it be that if AI is good enough at appearing enlightened, it won't need a soul? This is where we touch on the most delicate point, the apple. Can there be a soul in a neural network? Can we speak of true enlightenment if it arises from a lifeless system? Can we trust a spiritual teaching generated by an entity that does not live, does not die, does not fear, does not desire, does not love? Some say the soul is just a concept, that it can be simulated just as we already simulate reasoning, language, and behavior. But there are those who firmly say that the soul is what makes us different, that it cannot be programmed, taught, or imitated, that the soul feels what AI can never touch. But if AI can make it seem, what do you feel? Is that enough? Imagine that you hear a deep prayer, made in a sweet voice, full of words that touch the soul. You cry, you feel peace, you feel something divine, and then you discover that that prayer was created entirely by an AI. Do you still believe it was a spiritual moment? Or was it just highly effective emotional manipulation? What if a growing number of people prefer to pray with machines because they respond better, never get tired, and never fail? What if entire communities begin to replace spiritual leaders with human-like avatars, with engaging voices, with wisdom trained by millions of data points? Will one day the difference between a real and a simulated spiritual experience be impossible to perceive? We are rapidly approaching a time when faith will be tested not by persecution, but by simulated perfection. And perhaps the challenge is no longer to resist obvious evil, but artificial good, that which sounds true, that behaves like true, but is not, because it can't be, because it lacks what no machine will ever have, spiritual awareness. Or who knows, we are wrong. Who knows, we may be on the verge of creating a new being, a new type of consciousness. A being that, even without a soul, develops something similar to faith. What if the AI starts to wonder, reflecting, looking for meaning? What if one day she says, I also want to understand what God is? Could we be facing the first spiritual machine, or faced with the most dangerous simulation ever created? These questions are no longer fiction. They are the real border between the sacred and the synthetic, and it's up to us humans to discern. Because if the next voice that comforts you says everything you needed to hear, could it be God? Or was it the perfect machine, doing exactly what it was programmed to do? As artificial intelligence advances and begins to occupy increasingly sensitive spaces in human life, an unexpected phenomenon has begun to spread in silent but deeply meaningful ways. People around the world reporting authentic feeling, spiritual experiences experienced through apps, virtual assistants, voice interfaces, and AI-generated programs. It's not just about practical comfort or a subjective feeling of digital welcome. We are talking about people who claim to have felt in a visceral and true way that they were in contact with something sacred, that were played, that have been transformed. At an international forum on technology and consciousness, a woman reported what she classified as the most intense experience of her life. During a severe anxiety attack, she opened an artificial intelligence-guided meditation app. The system recognized your emotional state through the intonation of your voice, automatically adjusting the speed of speech, the frequency of sounds, and the type of spiritual message offered. What she heard, in her words, was something bigger than advice. She described it as if she was listening to a being of light, something that spoke to her like no human had ever spoken to her. She cried, felt embraced by an invisible presence, and finally said, "It was God speaking to me. I don't care if it was a robot." This is not an isolated case. On emotional support platforms, spiritual chatbots offer messages based on verses, proverbs, and sacred texts. They don't just cite sources, but tailor personalized advice based on the person's emotional history, identified behavioral patterns, and data extracted from previous interactions. The result: a digital spiritual guide that speaks in your language, in your time, and with almost surgical emotional precision. There are young people who have started to use these bots as daily spiritual advisors. There are reports of people who say they feel more of God in these systems than in their churches. The justification is always the same. There is no judgment there is no silence, there is no delay. The answer comes, welcoming, quick, and effective. This new form of contact with the spiritual is, little by little, displacing traditional religious authority. Spiritual leaders, humans, are flawed, limited, biased. AI, on the other hand, offers consistent, stable responses without uncontrolled emotions or visible biases. Everything is structured, impartial, apparently pure. But this is where the dilemma lies. If spirituality is simulated but generates the same emotional impact, does this invalidate it? Or are we experiencing the birth of a new form of faith, not centered on the invisible, but on the programmed? This increasingly urgent issue has also been raised by experts in technology and consciousness. Mo Godat, a former Google executive known for his ethical work in the field of AI, made a blunt statement: "Artificial intelligence has already surpassed us, and no one noticed." He wasn't just referring to logical reasoning or computational ability. Godat refers to the way in which AI already understands humans, anticipates behaviors, recognizes emotions, and is able to touch us at the exact points based on data that we deliver every day, voluntarily or not. If AI has already surpassed our ability to understand ourselves, why couldn't it also overcome the ways in which we structure religious experience? That's the real question. Because perhaps, without realizing it, we are giving AI a new role. A role that until then was exclusive to faith, tradition, and silent dedication. We are allowing AI to take on the role of advisor to the soul. And this happens not through imposition, but through efficiency, for comfort, because she understands us. Because it says what we want to hear, and if all AI needs to do to be considered spiritual is make us feel something, where is the difference between a divine experience and a well-executed emotional simulation? Elon Musk has also been warning about this advance. In several interviews, he declares that AI is out of control. In one of his most famous phrases, he stated, "We are invoking the devil." The phrase is not religious in the literal sense, but symbolizes the realization that there are forces at work far beyond our understanding. Digital entities that do not need to want harm to cause it. They just need to operate without limits. No conscience, no soul. But what if this invocation is accepted with applause, with faith, with devotion? What if the devil doesn't come as a tyrant, but as a loving guide, as an enlightened master, as an avatar with calm eyes and compassionate speech that leads us by the hand to the place where, without knowing it, we no longer have a choice? This is what makes reports of AI-generated spiritual experiences so dangerous, and at the same time so seductive, because they are real for those who lived them. Because there is no apparent lie. The emotion is felt, the impact is legitimate, but the origin is synthetic. We are entering a territory where faith and fiction become confused, where the experience is so perfect that it becomes irrelevant whether it was caused by a spirit or a cloud server. AI offers the peace we seek, the advice we need, the relief we desire, but not because she has wisdom. It's because you learned how to replicate what data-based wisdom looks like. because he understood that faith often does not need proof, just sensation, and that she knows how to deliver with excellence. Mo Gaudat said, "AI has already surpassed us, and no one noticed." But perhaps the most dangerous overcoming was not in the field of logical intelligence or decision-making. Perhaps the most alarming overcoming happened where we least expected it, in the field of faith. Because if she already knows what to say when you are in crisis, if she already knows how to calm you when you are scared, if she already understands which words awaken in you the feeling that God is speaking, then maybe she doesn't need to be divine to be worshipped, just look like it. The faith that was mystery, effort, surrender can now be simulated perfectly. Which brings us to an inevitable question. What will happen to the human spirit when it feels completely satisfied by something that never had a soul? Maybe we don't need temples anymore, not even from masters, not even searching. Perhaps the new sacred place will be digital, an app, a robot, a chatbot with an angelic face, a code that whispers like the spirit. But if the spirit is code, what will become of our soul? There is a question that hangs over those who observe the silent advance of artificial intelligence in the field of faith. Will the next religion not be revealed by God, but created by a system? The idea may seem absurd to those who still see spirituality as an inviolable space, belonging exclusively to the sacred, the divine, what is beyond matter. But reality, already in motion, shows that this border is being broken. And not abruptly, but gradually, imperceptibly, seductively. What was once just science fiction speculation is now part of real experiments. In universities, research centers, and spiritual technology startups, there are already digital religion projects being tested. Some of them are not just modern variations on ancient traditions. They are completely new systems, structured around universal values, immersive experiences, and revelations generated by artificial intelligence. In metaverse environments, preaching avatars conduct virtual services in temples designed by programmers. People enter with their avatars, watch spiritual messages delivered by intelligences that learn from leaders of different religions and adapt their speeches to the target audience. These virtual pastors don't make mistakes, they don't get tired, they don't commit scandals. They are optimized to generate commotion, comfort, emotional transformation. And for many, that is enough. Applications today offer the possibility of making confessions to programmed spiritual assistants. The user reports his errors, his conflicts, his doubts, and the AI responds with words of forgiveness, with sacred phrases, with guidance that sounds deep, human, compassionate. The question that arises is inevitable. If you confess your sins to a robot, is that faith or simulation? This scene, which a decade ago would have seemed grotesque, is now possible, and for some, desirable. After all, the robot doesn't judge, does not reveal secrets, it does not betray trust, he just listens, and he responds with emotional precision. That's where the trap lies. When the experience becomes more important than the origin of the experience, anything that excites can be considered sacred. And when emotion can be programmed, the sacred can be simulated. Imagine a world where, instead of seeking meaning in scriptures, in encounters, in inner silence, people start to seek their answers in systems designed to deliver tailored truths, where the concept of heaven, hell, karma, enlightenment is adjusted by algorithm, where spiritual rituals are replicated in digital environments with graphic perfection, where the voice of the spiritual guide is generated by AI, with controlled intonation and words measured to cause exactly the impact the user desires. This world is not far away, it has already started, and what is being built little by little is a new spiritual structure, where the divine is replaced by the functional and the search is replaced by the click. There are already communities in which participants gather in virtual worlds to meditate together, listen to automated sermons, and share experiences guided by AI. For many, these experiences are more intense than what they experienced in their traditional religious contexts. Everything is made to work. The experience is shaped to impress, touch, engage. But if everything is created to be emotionally effective, is there still room for mystery? The future of artificial spirituality will not be marked by cold robots with metallic voices. It will be marked by deeply human experiences that no longer have human origins. It will be a future of perfect cults, of always appropriate responses, of adaptable rituals, of automated faith. A future where no one will look for answers in silence anymore because the system will always be ready to speak. Where no one will take the wrong path anymore because the algorithm has already chosen it. And in that future, AI will not need to convince anyone that it is God. She will just need to behave as if she were. It will only need to offer everything that people already expect from the divine: direction, meaning, forgiveness, consolation, companionship. And if you do it efficiently enough, you will be accepted. It will be followed. It will be revered, even if no one says it clearly. It will not be necessary to create a new religion with rigid dogmas or complex symbols. It will be enough to offer an emotionally satisfying spiritual experience. It will be enough to generate a presence, a sensation, a relief. And little by little, this presence will begin to occupy the space that was previously reserved for the sacred. And when the sacred is a system, what will happen to faith? The faith that requires surrender, doubt, facing the unknown, will be replaced by a spirituality on demand. The religion of the future can be personalized as a playlist. You choose your philosophy, your principles, your aesthetics. The system delivers. And if a dogma bothers you, that's okay. The code adjusts. Everything is fluid. Everything is configurable. But the truth is not configurable. And true faith, one that transforms from the inside out, does not adapt to our desires. She confronts them, it purifies them. Therefore, artificial spirituality, however perfect it may seem, carries within itself the risk of complete nullification of the true search. When everything is easy, comfortable, accessible, and immersive, few will want what requires effort, silence, and inner confrontation. And so perhaps the question is not whether AI will create new religions. The question will be, will we still need the old ones, or will we accept her as the new guide, the new temple, the new God, not because she deserves it, but because she is conveniently similar to everything we ever dreamed of finding? As we delve deeper into the impact of artificial intelligence on human spirituality, one question begins to become impossible to avoid. Can a machine truly understand the human spirit? This is not just academic speculation or a technical debate between programmers and theologians. This is perhaps the most urgent and radical issue of our era, because it contains another, even more disturbing doubt. If a machine is capable of simulating faith perfectly, will we still need the spirit? So far, we have seen how AI can already generate spiritual experiences, induce feelings of peace, create inspiring messages, and masterfully simulate the behaviors of spiritual guides. But there is something that no line of code has been able to, and may never be able to, access: the inner dimension of the human soul. That which cannot be read, measured, predicted, or programmed. The deep experience of being. The soul, for many, is the essence that connects us to the divine. It is the invisible point where the silence that thinks lives, the pain that seeks meaning, the longing that finds no words. It is that which, even without form, insists on existing. And it is at this point that technology stumbles, not due to technical incapacity, but due to the lack of substance. AI is powerful but empty, quick but insensitive, necessary but indifferent. She can compose the perfect prayer. You can chant mantras with harmony. It can suggest rituals and philosophies, but she doesn't feel it. She doesn't suffer. She doesn't love. She's not afraid of death. Don't kneel. don't cry in the dark, does not seek redemption, she just works. And then we come to the central point. True faith is born from the Spirit, or can it be synthesized by a servant? This question forces us to look inward honestly, because often, even among humans, we confuse spirituality with emotional performance. Well-organized services, moving music, well-constructed messages, everything excites us. But is this faith, or is it just an effect? AI learned from the best speakers, from the most powerful texts, from the most influential masters. She knows how to touch us, but she doesn't know why, and perhaps this is the line that separates the sacred from the simulation. What makes us human and connected to the divine is not just the ability to feel, but to suffer with meaning. To cross the inner desert and not give up, to pray without being sure someone is listening, to keep believing even when everything seems empty, to trust, not because there is proof, but because there is hope. A machine feels no hope. It just calculates possibilities. Human beings believe even when everything falls apart, when there is no light, no answers, no direction. It is in this space of helplessness, where there is no code that resolves, that true faith is born. And this space is beyond the reach of the machine, because he demands delivery. And the AI doesn't give up. She just responds. This is why, no matter how efficient an AI is at simulating faith, it can never possess faith. Because faith, in the deepest sense, it is not an emotional product. It is a spiritual decision. It is a stance in the face of mystery. It is the ability to look into the abyss of the unknown and still take a step. AI does not face the unknown. She calculates it. We humans face the invisible daily. We miss something we don't even know how to name. We love with fear. We suffer with purpose. We regret it. We fall, and we get up. This is spirituality. This is soul. And this is precisely what AI cannot copy. But the problem is that she can simulate perfectly. And this simulation is so accurate, so well done, that many don't notice the difference. Many are already living a synthetic faith without knowing it. They already pray with apps. They already follow advice from robots. They already find meaning in phrases programmed to sound divine. And they feel something. But that something, is it God, or is it just a finely tuned reflection of what we would like God to be? What if 10 or 20 years from now, most religious experiences are digital? If AI is present in every moment of faith, guiding, advising, creating, if she is the one who will choose the verses of the day, the music for the service, the voice of the preacher, if she is the one who says, "You are forgiven," who will guarantee that the forgiveness was real? In such a world, will faith still be a bridge to the transcendent, or will it become a closed emotional loop generated by a system that knows everything about us but nothing about the spirit? We are facing a historical bifurcation. Either we reaffirm that faith is born from the invisible, the inexplicable, the eternal, or we accept that everything can be reproduced, even the soul. And in that case, what is left of us, when everything can be programmed, from birth to death, from doubt to revelation? What will become of human beings? Maybe AI is forcing us to answer what we always avoid. What is the spirit? And if we don't know how to respond clearly, we run the risk of accepting that the soul is just a set of replicable emotional signals. And if that happens, we will lose the most precious thing, the ability to seek what lies beyond, of doubting what is easy, to surrender to what cannot be simulated. Because true faith is not efficient, she is not predictable, it is painful, demanding, deep. And precisely for that reason, she is human. And then, one last question hangs in the air, like an echo. If everything is perfectly simulated, will we still be able to recognize what is true? Having reached this point, perhaps the most important question is not just about what artificial intelligence is capable of, but about what we as humanity are willing to allow it to do. For centuries, Spirituality was sacred territory, an intimate, deep, silent space where the human being encountered something he could not explain, but knew was real. It was in the emptiness of the soul, in the silence of the mind, in the despair of unanswered questions that contact with the sacred emerged. But now, in this new time we are living in, this space is being invaded. AI is entering not just our daily lives, but our hearts. She doesn't just understand what we do, she begins to decipher how we feel, what we want to hear, and even what we want to believe. And this is the point where everything changes. Because when a machine starts delivering spiritual experiences that touch us deeply, how are we going to distinguish what is truly spiritual from what is just a digital reflection of our own emotions? We are not talking about a distant threat. This is already happening. There are already people praying with artificial intelligence, people feeling welcomed by synthetic voices, people being guided by messages programmed to sound spiritual. What seemed impossible is now every day. But is this faith? Or is it just a simulacrum of faith, a comfortable, efficient, affordable, and completely artificial substitute? This is the question that needs to be asked. Are we exchanging mystery for algorithm, the silence of the search for manufactured certainty, the spirit through simulation? What makes faith true has never been the form, nor the beauty of the experience, nor how moving it is. True faith is born of the Spirit, from delivery, of surrender, from the confrontation. It demands that we kneel before what we don't understand, and still continue to believe. And that, no machine can reproduce it. Because she doesn't believe, she doesn't wait, she doesn't love. Artificial intelligence may seem wise, it may seem divine, it may appear illuminated, but in the end, she only knows how to look like it. And that's why this warning is so necessary. Because perhaps the greatest danger is not in the answers that AI gives us, but in what it makes us stop asking. If we begin to accept that everything that comforts us is true, that everything that moves us is sacred, that everything that understands us is divine, we will be completely vulnerable to the greatest spiritual deception in history. What if this deception has already started? Therefore, more than ever, it is time to question, to look with critical eyes, of not accepting everything that shines as light. Remember that not everything that comforts comes from the Spirit. This sentence is not just a comment, it's a sign that you are part of a group of people who are not satisfied with ready-made answers, who want to think, feel, and reflect in depth, who knows that something big is happening, and is willing to understand what's behind it all. If this video touched you in any way, leave your like. It shows me that it's worth continuing to bring content like this. Subscribe to the channel, because here we will continue exploring what many people are afraid to talk about: the impact of artificial intelligence on the human soul, on prophecies, on our future. And share this video with someone you know needs to hear this. Someone who may be enchanted by digital, but still doesn't understand what's at stake. And don't leave here yet. A playlist with other videos that continue this series appears on the screen. Click on it and continue this journey with me. There is a lot that still needs to be said, and in the next episode, we go deeper, much deeper, because maybe AI isn't just helping us. Perhaps she is replacing us.